Well, welcome, my friends, back to another Common Communion. I'm your host, Jonathan Brandenburg, and I get to be the pastor at Christ Lutheran Church and School. And it is a beautiful day, a beautiful moment to be with you all. It's Sunday, and I don't know about you guys, but I'm having a pretty good Sunday. I'm tired, a bit worn out, but pretty good Sunday. How are y'all doing? How are y'all doing on Sunday, or whatever day you find it is today? How's life treating you? I asked that, and I know you may be able to respond in the comments or shoot me a DM or something like that, but I know you can't respond like immediately. But I want to ask that. And I want to ask that in sort of a way of saying, like, how are you really doing? And I keep wanting to ask those kind of questions because, guys, I just am convinced there are fewer and fewer spaces in our life that we can kind of really be vulnerable about how we are really doing, how things really are going. Not just vulnerable in that it's a challenge or it sucks or it's hard or it's painful or those kind of things, but also vulnerable and it's okay. I found myself the other day actually having a really good day, but I was asked by a person who kind of knows my existential crises. I have a bit of a dark humor. I say about have an existential crisis every hour on the hour, and I actually hesitated to tell this friend that, I'm genuinely doing good. It might have been just in that moment, for that hour, for that minute, but I was doing okay. I was really grateful and feeling a bit warm and fuzzy about life at that time. And you know what? That sometimes takes just as much strength to say those kind of things, that you're actually doing pretty good today, that life is good, as it does to say life isn't good and there's some real struggle happening right now. And that the reason I bring all that up is because I'm sitting here in my backyard looking out on the Pacific Ocean, looking out on the beautiful blue skies, and I am grateful. I really, truly am. But I'm also exhausted, and I'm tired, and some things are going great, and some things are going not as great. And that's exactly, I think, a moment where God really wants to speak into you, speak into me. The reason I say that is because the text I got to preach on this morning that I'd like to share with you today is from Genesis chapter 15, and just 6 simple verses. But it's basically a story of this guy named Abraham. You might have heard of him. Pretty famous. And Abraham is on this journey, and he doesn't know exactly where this journey is going to lead him, but he knows this because he's been promised this. He's been promised a land. Yep, he's been promised to be blessed. Yep, and to bless others. Awesome. But one thing he's been promised for sure is that he is going to have a son, that him and his wife, Sarah, are going to have a son. And yet by chapter 15, pretty well into the story, this journey, there's no son. There's not even a pregnancy. There's nothing. And so God comes and talks to Abraham in chapter 15 and says, how are you doing, basically? And Abraham says, not good. I'm not good at all. There's much to be grateful for, absolutely, but not good, because I have no heir, I have no son, and so somebody in my household, somebody else in my household is going to be my heir, I guess. I guess that's how you're going to work it. And you don't know how to read Abraham's tone. It's written down, it's ancient, it's all that. But I'm telling you, the way it reads, the way it gets translated, just makes me think that it might be one of those moments where he's trying to be grateful, much to be grateful for. He does have a wife. He has actually expanded his flocks and his herds, so he's a wealthier man and all these kind of things. But he obviously having this like burr in his saddle about saying, hey, how am I supposed to be a great nation if I can't even have one child? And so God, in his usual sort of object lesson-y sort of way, I swear God speaks mostly as a children's message more than a deep theological sermon. But he says to Abraham, look up into the sky. And it must be nighttime when he's talking to God here. Because see all the stars of the sky. If you could count them, that's how numerous your offspring would be. It's pretty impressive. Because for a guy in Abraham's position, for a guy who lives multiple thousands of years ago, he's not going to try to count those stars. The stars look infinite. The stars look innumerous. And he's struggling to believe that God's promise of just even one son, which he hasn't fulfilled yet, is going to somehow turn into the stars in the sky. This infinite points of light. And yet that's what God's promising. But here's the crazy thing about God. And I think God still does this to this day. He absolutely says, this is what's going to happen. He's like, sweet, when? Can't tell you. How? Can't tell you. Okay, can I get a time frame? No, not so much. Can I know for sure that it's going to happen? Outside of my promise, no. And you get the human moment in that for Abraham. You get the real human moment in that. And that's why it says in Scripture, Abraham believed God, and God credited it to him as righteousness. That you and I, but Abraham, could believe lots of different things in life. We really could. Life could teach us many, many, many lessons, and depending on what lesson it is or what moment it is in our life, we could lean into that moment. For some of us, life has taught us the lesson of not trusting others, even those that we love. Some of us, life has taught us to only be able to trust those who absolutely prove beyond a shadow of a doubt they can be trusted. The proof is in the pudding. Some of us have been taught all sorts of things that we lean into, that we believe, and maybe we don't even know we actually believe them as much as we do. And here is Abraham, a man of a very interesting background. Go ahead and Google that. And a man who is trying to follow after this thing called Elohim, God. And there's this moment of relationship. There's this moment of truth and honesty, vulnerability between God and Abraham. And Abraham shares his gratitude and his frustration. He shares his both thanksgiving and his reservations. He shares his hopes and he shares his fears. And God doesn't brush him off. God doesn't say, don't worry about it, I got this. God shows him the stars of the heavens. I love that. Guys, I really do. Because no matter where you are in life, seriously, no matter where you are in life, you can always look up and you can see the stars. Or maybe just a glimpse of the stars. And you can be reminded, even if it's for a moment, that you are not forgotten. That you are actually part of this journey of faith that Abraham was on. That you who are on this journey of wrestling with God, trying to be grateful to God and yet also having so many questions and so many doubts are part of the ancestry of this conversation Abraham had with God all those years ago. And that in reality, I know this sounds a little corny, I know this sounds a little cliche, but if you take the metaphor for what it is, at least, that we are reminded that we are God's stars. I know. I winced a little bit on that one, but I like it. I really do. Because God even says, look at the stars, Abraham. That's how numerous your descendants, and the blessing upon blessing upon blessing that's going to carry through your lineage is going to happen. And it's come down to us. It's come down to us who still wrestle with the same God, who still try to give as much gratitude as we can, and yet still have so many questions and fears and doubt. It's all just part of that same story, my friends. And God has built a church on this. And he's built a church on this because Jesus was the cornerstone. Jesus was the rock in which all this was going to take place, not Abraham. Abraham was a great sort of start, if you will. Abraham was amazing in many ways, but no, it was actually Jesus who solidified this whole conversation so it could go on not in command, demand, and if you don't come through, you're punished, but it could go on in grace. It could go on in mercy. It could go on in compassion. That even in those moments where we don't believe, even in those moments where our faith is shaken to its very core, that somebody else believes for us. That somebody much more powerful and much more steadfast can believe even when we feel like we've lost faith, because we are God's stars. He is not going to leave us. He is not going to abandon us. He has tied himself to us. God has absolutely tied himself to us, because we are God's children. We are God's daughters and sons. We are loved. And as such, we are invited into this tension. And as such, we are invited into this conversation. And as such, we are invited into the same journey that Abraham was invited into. And invited to lean into faith. Faith that some higher, beautiful being is actually leading us. Faith that it actually is going to turn out the way that higher being, that God, wants it to be at. Faith in just that it's better to hope naively than fear realistically. Faith that tomorrow could bring a full renewal, a new life. Just like Abraham was looking for a new life in a son, so many of us are looking for a new life, maybe of the heart, of the mind, of the body, of the soul. But we are God's stars. We are loved. We are seen, and we are part of this journey of faith. So, my friends, no matter where you find yourself, be reminded that you are part of Abraham's story, and that through Jesus, you are part of the grander story that God is telling through his people, the church. And that in that, it is absolutely 100% valid to have fears, doubts, reservations. I hate when my earpiece falls out. It's totally okay to have like moments that you just don't know, or moments that we're just absolutely grateful for just the blue sky and the sunshine on our backs. It's all good as long as we keep leaning into the conversation of faith, as long as we keep leaning into that invitation of grace and mercy and being led by that God who loves us infinitely. So you, my friends, may we all may we all go forward in faith, leaning in to trust that God is leading us. And with Him before us, what can possibly stand against us? Thank you, my friends, so much for joining us here on the Common Communion. I hope you are enjoying it, no matter where you find yourself today. Hope we are all reminded that we are part of the story and that we are God's stars and He is with us. God is with us. So may each and every one of you go with God today, whether in gratitude or in challenge, whether in hope or whether in fear. May all of us go forward in faith. All right, be well, my friends, and I'll see you next time on the Common Communion. Be well, my friends. Peace.